Most people are reading the wrong books about money. They're consuming bestsellers that promise get-rich-quick schemes, stock-picking strategies that don't work, and advice that fundamentally misunderstands how wealth is actually created and preserved. The financial literacy industry has become a massive marketing machine designed to sell you products, not educate you about economic reality. What you need instead is a foundation in real economics, sound money principles, and an is on a specific group, or whether you examine the long-term effects on all groups. This lesson applies to everything. When the government implements price controls, the immediate effect might help some consumers afford goods. The long-term effect is shortages, black markets, and reduced production. When central banks lower interest rates, the immediate effect is cheaper borrowing and asset price inflation. The long-term effect is understanding of how government policies, central banking, and monetary inflation systematically destroy the wealth of ordinary people. You need to understand the difference between nominal gains and real purchasing power. You need to see through the illusions created by fiat currency systems and recognize what actually constitutes lasting wealth. The 5 books I'm going to discuss aren't the ones you'll find on airport bestseller lists. They won't promise you 7 easy steps to financial freedom or teach you how to day trade cryptocurrencies. What they will do is give you a framework for understanding economic reality that will serve you for the rest of your life. They'll help you see through government propaganda about inflation, employment, and economic growth. They'll teach you why central banks are fundamentally destructive institutions and why hard assets matter more than paper promises. Let's start with the foundation of sound economic thinking. The first book everyone serious about understanding wealth must read is Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. This book, first published in 1946, remains the single best introduction to economic reasoning available. Hazlitt's central thesis is devastatingly simple. The difference between good economics and bad economics is whether you look only at the immediate effects of a policy, malinvestment, boom-bust cycles, and the destruction of savings. When politicians promise stimulus spending, the immediate effect is jobs for specific industries. The long-term effect is taxation or inflation that destroys wealth. Across the entire economy, most economic policy is based on ignoring the long-term consequences and the unseen effects. Politicians focus on the visible benefits while dismissing the invisible costs. Central, this relatively short work explains the origins of money, how gold and silver emerged as monetary metals through market processes, and how governments have systematically debased and destroyed monetary systems throughout history. Rothbard explains that money wasn't invented by governments or created by social contracts. Money emerged organically as the most marketable commodity, the good that could be most. Bankers celebrate asset bubbles while ignoring the inevitable crash. Financial media cheers stock market gains, measured in depreciating currency while ignoring the destruction of purchasing power. Hazlitt teaches you to see beyond the propaganda to the real economic consequences of policy decisions. Once you understand basic economic reasoning, you need to understand money itself. The second essential book is What Has Government Done to Our Money? By Murray Rothbard, Commodity with Intrinsic Value. The experiment with pure fiat currency is recent and historically unprecedented in scale. Every previous fiat currency has eventually failed, returning to its intrinsic value of 0. We're living through the largest fiat currency experiment ever attempted, and the historical precedents are not encouraging. The third book addresses the institution most responsible for our current monetary chaos, The Creature from Jekyll Island, by G. Edward Griffin. This book tells the story of how the Federal Reserve was created in 1913 through backroom dealing between politicians and banking interests. The Fed was sold to the American public as an institution that would prevent financial panics and stabilize the economy. The reality has been precisely the opposite. Griffin documents how the Federal Reserve operates as a cartel that benefits large banks at banking. The Federal Reserve is often portrayed as a group of wise technocrats managing the economy for the public good. Griffin reveals it as what it actually is: an institution designed to benefit banks and enable government spending through the hidden tax of inflation. Once you understand how the Fed actually operates, you can never look at monetary policy the same way. The fourth book turns to investment strategy grounded in sound money principles. Guide to the expense of everyone else. The Fed creates money out of nothing, enabling government deficit spending on a scale that would be impossible under a sound monetary system. This money creation is inflation in its truest sense, and it systematically transfers wealth from savers to debtors, from the middle class to the politically connected, from productive sectors to those closest to the money spigot. The book explains how fractional reserve banking works, how the Fed manipulates interest rates to artificially stimulate borrowing, and how this creates unsustainable booms that inevitably end in crashes. The 2008 financial crisis, the dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, every major financial crisis of the past century can be traced to Federal Reserve policies that distorted market signals and encouraged reckless lending and speculation. What makes this book essential is that it strips away the mystique surrounding central investing in gold and silver by Michael Maloney. While there are many books about precious metals, Maloney's stands out for connecting monetary history to practical investment advice. He explains not just why you should own gold and silver, but how these metals have functioned as money throughout history and why they'll continue to preserve wealth even as fiat currencies fail. Maloney breaks down the difference between currency and money. Currency is what we use, monetary systems. Maloney provides a framework for understanding not just that precious metals are valuable, but why they're valuable and how they fit into a strategy for preserving wealth against monetary debasement. What's particularly valuable is Maloney's discussion of the wealth transfer that occurs during currency crises. When fiat currencies collapse, wealth doesn't disappear. It transfers from those holding paper assets to those holding real assets. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for anyone who wants to protect their purchasing power. The question isn't whether currency debasement will continue, but how severe it will become and how prepared you are for it. The fifth and final book addresses the broader economic and political context, The Road to Serfdom, by Friedrich Hayek. While not strictly a book about money or investing, Hayek's classic work explains how government economic intervention inevitably expands, how central planning fails, and how the erosion of economic freedom leads to the erosion of political freedom. Hayek's central argument is that you cannot have socialist economic planning combined with political freedom. Economic control is political control. When government controls the means of production, when it directs investment, when it determines wages and prices, it necessarily controls every aspect of citizens' lives. The road to serfdom is paved with good for transactions, the paper bills and digital entries in bank accounts. Money is what stores value over time. For something to be money in the true sense, It must maintain purchasing power across decades and centuries. No fiat currency has ever accomplished this. Gold has accomplished it for 5,000 years. The book examines the gold-to-silver ratio, the history of monetary metals, the mechanics of how governments inflate currency supplies, and the inevitable consequences of debt-based intentions and policies that promise security at the expense of freedom. This is directly relevant to monetary policy because central banking is central planning of the most important market in the economy, the market for money and credit. When the Federal Reserve sets interest rates, it's engaging in price fixing on a massive scale. When it creates money through quantitative easing, it's allocating resources through political decisions rather than market processes. This is central planning, and it suffers from all the problems Hayek identified: lack of information, unintended consequences, and the concentration of power in the hands of bureaucrats. Reading Hayek helps you understand that the problems with our monetary system aren't just technical mistakes that could be fixed with better central bankers. They're inherent in the entire concept of centralized control of money. A truly free market would have competitive currencies, market-determined interest rates, and no institution with the power to create money out of nothing. We're far from that ideal, and Hayek explains why every step towards central planning, including monetary central planning, moves us further toward economic stagnation and political control. These 5 books form a comprehensive education in economic reality that you won't get from mainstream financial media, from business school, or from the investment industry. They teach you to think critically about government economic statistics, to understand the difference between nominal gains and real purchasing power, to see through the propaganda surrounding monetary policy, and to recognize what actually constitutes wealth. Armed with this knowledge, you'll stop celebrating stock market gains measured in depreciating dollars and start asking what those gains mean in real terms. You'll stop trusting government inflation numbers and start looking at the actual prices you pay for food, housing, healthcare, and education. You'll stop believing that central bankers are wise managers of the economy and start recognizing them as operators of a system that benefits the politically connected at your expense. More importantly, you'll understand why hard assets matter, why debt is dangerous in an inflationary environment, why precious metals have value beyond sentiment, and why protecting your wealth requires looking beyond conventional investment advice. You'll understand that the greatest transfer of wealth in history is happening right now as central banks worldwide engage in unprecedented monetary expansion, and you'll position yourself accordingly. The conventional financial advice industry wants you reading books about stock picking, real estate flipping, and entrepreneurial mindset. These topics have their place, but without a foundation in sound economics and monetary theory, you're navigating blindly. You might make money in nominal terms while losing purchasing power in real terms. You might follow strategies that work in a sound money environment but fail catastrophically under fiat currency debasement. These 5 books won't make you rich overnight. They won't give you hot stock tips or cryptocurrency trading strategies. What they'll give you is far more valuable, a framework for understanding economic reality that will serve you for life. They'll help you see through the illusions created by monetary inflation, recognize unsustainable trends before they collapse, and position your wealth in assets that will preserve purchasing power regardless of what happens to government currencies. The next financial crisis is not a matter of if, but when. The debt levels are higher than 2008, the monetary expansion has been more extreme, and the structural problems are more severe. When the crisis comes, the people who understand these principles will be positioned to preserve their wealth and potentially acquire assets at fire sale prices. Those who've been reading mainstream investment books and trusting conventional wisdom will watch their paper wealth evaporate. Read these 5 books. Understand the principles they teach. Apply them to your financial decisions. The knowledge they provide is worth more than any investment strategy, more than any stock tip, more than any entrepreneurial technique. They'll give you the ability to see economic reality clearly, and in a world of monetary illusion, that clarity is the foundation of real wealth.